Thank you very much, Linda. I want to first of all recognize my wife who's here. Many of you know her, Jennifer. And I also want to recognize Dale Durr. A lot of you know Dale Durr, retired Air Force. He is head of our Berks County Veterans Affairs Department. He's in the back. He has a table and all kinds of information. I feel like I have Marco Rubio water up here. There's no safe place to put it, so I want to start by thanking you for all that you do. It cannot be said too often that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, and often we connect that to service in the military, and that's very true. But at its very core, our country depends on people that fundamentally care not just about what's happening now, but what the future may bring, and care enough to do something about it. You've been doing that since the Berks County Patriots first met a number of years ago here in this building, and I thank you for it. I also want to thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening to address issues that most people either aren't aware of, or if they are, they don't understand how they impact each of us, often every day. When I ran for commissioner back in 2007, the most common question I received was, what does a commissioner do? It's now 2016, and the most common question I receive is, what does a commissioner do? And why is that? I will suggest to you that while we have a serious deficiency in our public education system when it comes to teaching young people about American history and about how our government functions, we have a very long history of not teaching about the value and importance of local government, and in particularly county government. Now, how can I prove very simply how important county government is? Look at the county budget. Now I'm going to give you a piece of history over the last 8 years. When I took office in 2008, the budget we inherited was $532 million. The budget this year is $465 million. We've never been close to the $532 million since, because I believe the number one job of any government at any level is fiscal responsibility, because if your fiscal house isn't in order, at some point, nothing else matters. Really. At some point, it's the debt. It's the financial crisis that drives everything in Harrisburg. And it's the debt and the financial crisis that drives everything in Washington, D.C. So that is first. But when you look at the $465 million budget, it's always telling where that money is spent and where the money comes from. We get annually in property tax, county property tax only, $136 million. If you do the math, that's just under 30%, 29-point-something% of our total budget. So the question is, where's the other money come from, and what is it for? It's overwhelmingly state and federal money to execute various state and federal programs at the local level. We rely heavily on the dollars that come from Harrisburg and Washington to do a variety of tasks. And we're not talking about welfare. Welfare is a federal and state program. I'm talking about a lot of other areas: transportation, aging services, children and youth services, etc. That's why, and I'm going to quickly go through some topics and leave time for questions. Where's Rod? You're all the way in the back there. How am I supposed to see you? You're supposed to tell me when I have 15 minutes left. Because okay. The first thing I want to talk about is the broken budget process in Harrisburg. Now, when you look at the budget, let's also look at school districts, municipalities, county government. We do not have the option of not passing a balanced budget on time. Year after year, we pass the balanced budget on time. It's very troubling to me that July 1 goes by and it's no big deal.
Carl's going to do the mic. Okay.
September 1 goes by and it's no big deal. In fact, we stand here today without a 2015-16 budget. Oh, we have significant parts of it in place. But what does it mean to you as a taxpayer? What does it mean to county government? Now first, let me make something plain so any legislator understands that I understand this key point. The budget process at the state level is far more complicated than the budget process at the county, municipal, or school district level. We have one body that debates, deliberates, and ultimately votes on the budget. Your school board, your township supervisors, or township commissioners, or your city council and mayor, they would have two. And the county, you have to be able to count to two. If you get two commissioners to agree, you pass the budget. So I acknowledge that this process is far more complicated. What you have is three equal but separate groups. And I'm not talking about the division of government, but the Senate has their say, the House has their say, and the governor has his say. Now the governor, in my opinion, has made an enormous mistake. He has assumed that he has some kind of a mandate because he got elected statewide by a significant margin, and that gives him the right to dictate to the other two bodies in the process. And that simply isn't the case. But mistake number one, Governor Wolf is the first governor in over 40 years to receive a budget and veto the entire thing. You see, most governors in most states have something called a line item veto. 70% of the budget that Governor Wolf got on his desk was either exactly what he asked for or slightly more. And he vetoed the entire thing, which threw the process back to square one. Without a doubt, that was the single biggest mistake in this process. He finally did the line item veto after 6 months. The second problem I have is, ask yourself a question. If you're, well, none of us are professional sports figures, but if you were, and you had a contract, when would you start negotiating on your contract? Would you wait till the contract was up? No, you'd start negotiations early on. I also blame the leadership in the House and the Senate for not demanding to sit down with the governor and leadership the day after the governor's budget announcement last year and say, we're miles apart. I got tired of hearing legislators say to me in September and October and November, we're negotiating. And I would say to them, I appreciate that, but we should have been negotiating last March. And we should be negotiating right now. But here's a second problem with the governor. The governor, when he line item vetoed, played politics again. One of the items he cut in half is the ag budget. They would say, why would he cut the ag budget in half? Penn State Extension. Berks County, #1 industry. Penn State Extension provides tremendous assistance to our farmers. They're virtually zeroed out. Here's why. Because agriculture is primarily important in counties that are controlled by Republican legislators. Pure politics, folks. No other reason makes any sense. The third issue that I have with the governor is his idea of negotiations. Anyone listen to his speech when he announced the 16-17 budget? That is not exactly the way to sit down and try to work things out in basically destroying the Republican leadership in the House. We have a leadership problem, but here's how it's affected you. Counties across the Commonwealth were not paid last year. At the peak, Berks County in December was owed over $27 million, and it wasn't all state money. The majority of it was federal money that had gone from the federal government to the state that the state was holding. not paying us. Number two, many counties right around us, we did not have to borrow. Lancaster had to borrow, Dauphin had to borrow, Montgomery had to borrow. Many counties around us had to freeze their hiring. Almost all counties stopped paying the providers that are providing services in the children and youth area, in the drug and alcohol area, in the mental health area. And those entities had to borrow money. The question is, who is going to foot the bill for the carrying costs of these counties? Taxpayers. Taxpayers. There's some changes, I think, that need to happen so that this doesn't happen quite this way again. Number one, I suggest we move the state budget to a calendar year, just like counties. Do you realize the county's budget, we're working now on the 2017 budget. We'll take most of the year looking at every single department, looking at impacts 5 years out. The state is July 1st. So when we did our budget for 16, do you know how much information we had from the state on the money that they were going to provide to us? Nothing. We didn't even have the dollars for the second half of 2015 because there was no budget. It would be very helpful to everyone involved if we were on the same budget cycle. Another thing that would help is the politics. When Governor Wolf was elected in 2014, he came into office, and in March, he had to submit a budget. He didn't even have all of his cabinet secretaries in place, and he was submitting a budget. When I took office in 2008, a budget had already been voted on in December. I started working on the budget for 2009. To me, that makes a lot of sense. But the biggest issue is the right people need to feel the financial pain. In 2009, when the last budget crisis occurred up till about Thanksgiving, many state employees were not paid. State parks shut down. Some other departments cut back services. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ruled that the state couldn't do that. So this time, they just stopped paying counties. I suggest that if the legislature and the governor miss the July 1st deadline, we have a law in place that says the governor, the cabinet secretaries, and the legislators do not get paid their salary. They don't get any expenses paid until they pass and ratify a real budget. That's a poor job. A major issue that we have been fighting at the state level with the County Commissioners Association, and the County Commissioners Association is Democrat and Republican. You would be amazed how important the prevailing wage issue is to counties, to schools, to municipalities. The prevailing wage law was passed in 1962, and it basically said that any public works project of $25,000 or greater had to use something called prevailing wage. Basically, it is the prevailing union wage in an area. Does anyone know how many times that threshold has been increased since 1962? Zero. Zero. If we simply index that number for inflation, it would be over $196,000 today. Now, let me make it clear. I believe prevailing wage is wrong. It is a protection game to protect unions. I believe we should be able to hire businesses that are responsible businesses that can provide the proper insurance, the proper bonding, and come in and bid. Let businesses bid based on their work, the quality of their work, their labor, their materials. That's the way it should be, because right now, that adds 25 to 35% to the cost of construction, and almost nothing we do is under $25,000. Here's what's scary, folks. We campaigned. In 2013, I was president of the association. our number one issue was prevailing wage reform. We knew that we didn't have the votes to repeal it, so we fought to try to raise the threshold to where it should be, because that would be a huge savings for our taxpayers. With a Republican governor, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate, we could get a bill out of the House or the Senate. That's shameful. And that is an issue that impacts every single one of you. You want to look at cost of school construction? Ask yourself what happens if your school construction was 25 to 35% less than it is today. Ask yourself what would happen if a majority of the smaller projects the county government does. Carpet. 3 years ago, we had to do a carpet project. Not only did it raise the cost because we had to use prevailing wage because it was over $25,000, we had one of the major local carpet companies decline because prevailing wage is not just about rates, it's also about cumbersome paperwork that many people look as traps by the Department of Labor and Industry. We need fundamental change. Third, 2015, we saw the beginning of roughly 20 plus laws that have become known as the Sandusky Laws. Now, let me make something clear. What happened in the case of Jerry Sandusky and what he did to children is horrific. It's unconscionable. But folks, I'm very tired of politicians that every time they hear about a problem, the answer is another law. We have too many laws in this country. And I will tell you, the Sandusky Laws, in my opinion, while well-intentioned, they didn't talk to county government when they put these laws in place. They didn't ask, what impact will this have on county government? I don't even think they really thought through, would this stop Jerry Sandusky? Because here's what it means. In Berks County, we started measuring the impact right away. What impact? And when you have questions, if you want more detail, I can give it to you. But here's the bottom line. In 2015, our caseload in Children and Youth Services increased by 38%, directly attributable to this. Number two, guess what? You talk to our legislators and they will tell you we hate unfunded mandates from Washington, D.C. But they get sent to us all the time, and the Sandusky Laws did not provide one dime to county government. It's cost us over $2 million. We did not make new hires right away. We made our departments prove that this was a real increase and it was a long-term increase. By the end of the year, we had hired 7 new people, 5 caseworkers exclusively to deal with the increase, and 2 new county detectives in our sex abuse unit just to deal with the increase. Look, I am not against protecting children. And I've heard that from some legislators that have heard me talk about this. That's not what it's about. I want to protect children. But a couple of weeks ago, I had a family in my office that got caught in the bigger, broader Sandusky net. A farm family from here in Berks County, where tragically a young father ran over a child with the mower. The child was alive and doing very well. He was in my office, a little boy. The state police investigated immediately. They ruled it was an accident. Our district attorney investigated immediately and ruled it was an accident. But because of the new language in the Sandusky Laws, our Children and Youth Department ruled that he was a threat to children and should not be able to be with his children the rest of their childhood alone. And they appealed. If they hadn't appealed, he would be dealing with that. He won on appeal. That net is too big. We need to look at the results. It's not enough to say, I passed a bill to deal with the issue. Thirdly, criminal degree. How many people in the county jail, about 1,100 people are there, do you believe are in the county jail and are there because they've been convicted of a crime? What percentage? Here's the numbers. What? 20%? These are people that are convicted. Here's the number. 40% of the people in the county jail are there because they're convicted. 60% are waiting for trial. 60%. The number is 58% nationwide. Probably one of the areas that have been changed the most has to do with our criminal justice system. And it's not because I'm soft on crime. I've come to the realization that if you're poor, if you're mentally challenged, or you have limited educational attainment ability, it's difficult to get a fair break in our justice system. You want me to tell you about it? I can talk about it because I've watched some of these hearings, and what I've seen happen to people would never happen to me. But people should be placed in jail awaiting trial based on what?
Risk.
What?
Risk.
Risk. Now, if somebody's committed a horrific crime, I'm one of those people, no bail. Put them behind the bars, protect the rest of us from those people that are serious criminals. But it's no longer based on risk in this country. It's based on wealth. So you can have somebody that has committed a small crime. They get a $10,000 bail. They have to pay 10%. They've got a choice to go to the loan shark bail company or go to jail. And a lot of them go to jail. Somebody else who's wealthier can commit the same crime and they get the money. It's not about risk anymore. I heard a president judge from Mesa County, Colorado speak in December at a National Association of Counties meeting. And he shared that he began to look at this a number of years ago, and in 2012 they made a major change. Personal recognizance is one of the ways people are handled. If you feel they're not a risk, then there's two things: a risk to the public or a flight risk. Those are the two big issues. They would use personal recognizance. In Mesa County, only about 30% of the people that were going to trial were given personal recognizance. And this president judge said, wait a minute. We've got people in jail because they can't make bail, not because they're a flight risk, not because they're a risk to the community. That's wrong. And as president judge, he changed the rules. From 2012 to 2015, they went from 30% of the people going out on personal recognizance to 59%. They also tracked, and they had been tracking, the number of people that are going to trial that show up for trial. The number was 80% in 2012. What do you think it was in 2015? It was 80%. It was unchanged. Here's the last point. There are a lot of things in criminal justice reform. The county spends of $136 million in property tax. The county spends in courts and corrections, which includes our prison, $85 million of the $136 million every year. So it's not just a social issue. It's not just an issue of what is right. It's also a huge taxpayer issue. Finally, the Cadillac Tax. Now, there's a lesson here. I am at heart a constitutionalist, a conservative. But I think sometimes those of us as conservatives that believe in hard work believe that success should be because you're willing to stick in for the long haul. You're willing to do what it takes. When it comes to politics, we lose that understanding and we want it all or nothing. We want it all at once. Now, I'm not drawing a broad brush, but there is a serious danger. You'll see what I mean in a second. Folks, the other side has a strategy, and they've had this strategy for 50 to 70 years. It's called incrementalism. It's a little bit like the frog. If you throw the frog in a pot of boiling water, he'll jump out. But if you put a frog in a cold pan of water and put it on heat and slowly heat it up, it'll never move. Because it's happening slowly. What we see in our country today didn't happen overnight, and we're not going to change it overnight. Some people disagreed with me, but last April, I was in Washington, D.C., standing up for legislation to eliminate the Cadillac tax in Obamacare. Now, why? There are a couple of reasons. Number one, to me, is I've looked at the Cadillac tax. First of all, it isn't what you think it is. The Cadillac tax is designed to ultimately catch every single private health care plan in the country and drive all of them into a single-payer system. That's what it's designed to do. It also is a 40% tax on businesses and county government on plans that go above that threshold. I believe we need to do whatever we can to gut Obamacare. But right now, as long as President Obama is in office, he is not going to allow us or sign a bill that says we're eliminating Obamacare. We have to fight. What most people don't know. When does the Cadillac tax go into force?
2018.
I heard 2018. How many think it's 2018? How many think it's later than that? When did it change? It changed at the end of last year. Now, in spite of what you think about the spending bill that was passed at the end of the year or towards the end of the year with John Boehner, one of the things buried in that was to put off the Cadillac tax for 2 more years, which I believe will give a Republican president an opportunity to kill the whole thing. But we need to stand up. I stood up at the Capitol steps with a Democratic congressman, a Republican congresswoman from Nevada, with some union leaders speaking out against the Cadillac tax. We need to stand up for what we believe in. And it is amazing, as I've grown in the job of county commissioner, to see all the different ways county government touches our local people and the issues that we deal with. That's why tomorrow morning at 5 a.m., I'm driving to Washington, D.C. for the National Association of Counties annual legislative conference. We'll talk about a lot of different issues. Cadillac tax will be one of them. Waters of the U.S. and EPA overreach will be another one. But we need to stand up, whoever we are. You do that on a regular basis as Berks County Patriots. We need elected leaders to also stand up, and all of us to do what we can where God has placed us. Before I give some closing comments, where's Rod again? 15 minutes, is that where we're at? Let's take some questions. I would ask you one question, if you could. Try to stick on these issues for county government. Otherwise, we can get far afield on a lot of other issues, and I'd rather stick on county government if we can. Question? Yes?
Okay, I work in the mental health field, and some counties have what they call a mental health court, which is a lot more successful from what I have read. Is Berks County considering a mental health court?
Yes. We already have diversionary courts for drug and alcohol. We have a veterans court, and what that means, you have a veteran or you have somebody who the underlying issue is drug and alcohol. There are options to prison. Again, they save the county money, and they're more likely to deal with the underlying issue. Mental health is becoming an enormous issue. We have one entire wing of the county jail filled with people who the issue is mental health. No matter what we do, if we don't deal with the mental health issue, they are back again and again. Here's another crazy thing, and this is one of the things we're fighting with the federal government. When a person is jailed, and they're poor, and they're on Medicaid, and they're jailed for even 2 days, they lose their Medicaid. And the county takes over all their health care, but more importantly, when they get out, it can take a month or more for them to get their Medicaid back. And what happens to people with mental health issues that can't get their meds? They're back in our jail before they can get back on Medicaid. We have joined a national program called Stepping Up with the National Association of Counties, where counties are working together with local police departments to divert not just diversionary courts, but down in Texas, San Antonio, Texas, and several surrounding counties have come up with a program that police officers are taught every morning. Here's what to look for. Now, in the case of a violent act, they have to go to jail. But in a nonviolent case, they take them to a mental health facility that's jointly managed by all of those counties. Those counties have saved enormous dollars over the last 3 years by diverting people out of the prison population and getting them the help they need. Mental health is a major issue. Question? Bruce and then Ruth.
Christian, it's my understanding that the county's housing some illegal aliens is it Warnersville, at the county facility in Warnersville? Could you give us an update on that, what's going on there?
We do not house illegal aliens, and since I've been here, we've not, and the years prior, as far as I know, we have not. That facility is under the federal direction, and it is for people who are claiming asylum. It's different than people that have come here illegally. They have to, by law, have a federal hearing, and the court has to determine do they have a legitimate claim for asylum or not. My understanding is right before I became a commissioner in 2008, the primary population was, what do you think? No, ethnicity. No, Chinese. In the last number of years, it's turned primarily Latino, but it depends where the hot spots are that people are coming from. But that's what that facility is. It's known as the Berks County Residential Center, but it does not house illegal aliens. It cannot. Ruth was next, and then I think 1, 2, and 3 is what I saw. What's that? Well, I said Ruth after Bruce. Sorry about that.
What can be done if the state is holding up federal monies to the county? Can the state be successfully sued? Can we divert the funds around the state so that they come directly to the
This is
county?
a huge issue. If the state, and it is our understanding that the governor had the authority to release the federal funds that already had been allocated by the federal government to the counties, and he did not. Now, if you talk to the governor and the budget secretary, they will tell you they didn't have the authority. County Commissioners Association believe they did. That's number 1. Number 2, the County Commissioners Association, with my voice and also with the voice of Kevin Barnhart, both of us are on the board, called for a lawsuit against the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to force them to release the money. When we looked at that, and this is the craziness of the way laws are set up, we had no standing to do that, but we, at the same time, were collecting dollars for the state and sending them to the state. Now, Berks County, and I credit Berks and Chester County for doing this, Berks and Chester County said, "You're crazy. We're not sending you any more money." Now, here's the problem with that. We looked into the law, and the law says that you can't withhold money from the state, and if you do, the department head that's withholding the dollars goes to jail. Well, the department would have been, the big one would have been the Recorder of Deeds, Fred Sheeler. Now, I made it very clear that if it meant I went to jail, I vote yes. I'd love to see him put me in jail. But as I said to Fred Sheeler, I'm not going to tell you, you need to be willing to go to jail. Ultimately, we didn't do that, but here's what's interesting. Chester County and Berks County did. They didn't pay it until the budget money was released, and nobody did a thing. And the reason is, I believe the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was scared to death to press that issue. But that is just a huge fallacy in the way the government gets away with stuff like that, because that would have saved most, not all, but most of the counties from having to go borrow money just if the federal money had been released. What time? Well, what, 5? Okay, one more question. Who did I promise here? Okay.
The township official down in Washington Township, the we are missing some money that the state kind of promised us, but it's okay. We budgeted for without that money, so we're doing okay. What can we do to this guy, Wolf, that he wants to do the 17-18 budget? What the heck? I mean, our 16-17 budget, what can we do to hold his feet to the fire? Because this is BS. He's violating the Constitution. He's violating it. So who are we? What can we do? I mean, I'm behind you on this right to work and all that other stuff. I'm 100% behind you. So if the people are behind this, we can get this done. This guy got to go.
Two things. Number one, support the legislators that are doing the right thing. Here's the funny thing. Do not get caught up in the comparison of the approval ratings for Governor Wolf, which are very low, and the approval ratings of the legislators. Why shouldn't you get caught up in following those ratings? Because the rating in one case is of an individual and that individual's performance or lack thereof. And that is a well-deserved low rating. When you rate a body, that's not the same as rating an individual. And the legislature, a lot of people look at the legislature and say the whole thing. Well, number one, if you're not in the majority, you have very little voice in what the House or the Senate does. And if you're not in leadership, you have very little say in what is done. You need to look at the individual legislators, and we have a number of them here in Berks County that have stood up and said no to these insane taxes and yes to controlling the growth of government and dealing with the spending issues. Number two, I believe you need to come out and strongly, courageously, but kindly. And when I say kindly, I'm not talking about wimp. But let's not be jerks like many other people. Let's stand up. Let's give the facts. Let's say why we believe this kind of budgeting is wrong and this kind of strategy is wrong. That's what I believe we need to do. We need to go after the governor based on the fallacy of his position, and we need to stand up for the legislators that are doing the right thing. Let me conclude. I'll take one more. Okay, I see your hand. Go ahead. Right over here. He's going to bring a mic.
When you were running for office, I mentioned it.
Yes.
I want to tell you something. You got the illegal aliens here, right?
Right?
You got the welfare department here, right? These people that work for money, they work their hearts out. I came here in 1952 from Athens, and I got a scumbag politician, my cousin. He ruined the whole country. And he's a scumbag, period. Okay? They're all scumbags. And I'm telling you right now, I'm a Donald Trump boy. I was in New York at the Price Club, 7 weeks. Now I'll tell you something, you're all going to go. It's time for you to stop playing games with the people's lives. We had enough of it. Now I'm going to tell you something, we're going to have a revolution in this country. I came here...
Yep. Just wait. Let me answer. I agree with you. One of the things that I had to learn as an elected official, I'm 56, I'll be 57 on March the 1st.
I'm 71.
You're older and more experienced than I am, but I spent the majority of my life working in the private sector. Linda mentioned what drove me to get involved is when I went back to Hungary and Czechoslovakia in 1979, and one evening sat down with my relatives and friends that were about my age. And I talked to them what it was like to live in America. I didn't have a phone. I had a stack of photographs. And I showed them pictures. And partway through the evening, and I spoke through my aunt. I didn't speak the language. They didn't speak English. They asked me, what do you mean? You keep talking about freedom. We don't know what you mean. I tried to explain. And I couldn't. You know why? Those young people were all born after World War II. All they knew was communism. That's all they knew. And I realized somebody trying to explain freedom to somebody who's never experienced it would be like trying to explain air to somebody who's never breathed it. to defend freedom in this country so that my children and my grandchildren never grew up in a country where they didn't understand what freedom was. And when I became an elected official, one of the first things I forgot was I didn't trust politicians. That's one of the reasons I ran. And I would get frustrated when people like yourself would get angry with me.
No, I'm not angry.
No, I understand, but yes, I had people get angry with me. And I finally said, that's okay. I don't trust government. I need to put myself back in the seat of the people that are there, and they're tired of being lied to. They're tired of empty promises. 40 years ago, and I'll close with this, 40 years ago, I was 17 years old. I can remember, sorry, I'm emotional, I can remember sitting in the basement watching the television screen, watching Ronald Reagan. I wanted Ronald Reagan to be the president in 1976. What did I know? I was a young kid. I hadn't been to Hungary and Czechoslovakia yet, but I knew enough from my parents and relatives that America could be great again. And it wasn't in 1976. Other than celebrating the 200th anniversary of our country, we weren't a great country. And I remember something Ronald Reagan said that stuck with me. He said, when I was governor of California, we had a watchword. When the government becomes we, instead of they, the people, then we've been here too long. I've never forgotten that. Because it is the people of America that are what make America great, not the politicians. It's the business people. It's the business people that create meaningful jobs, not the politicians. The politicians are not dictators. They don't get a mandate. They're elected by voters, and they're obligated to represent voters. And when they no longer represent the voters, it's time to vote those elected officials out of office and put somebody there that will represent them. At the end of the day, the answer is that people understand that the power of America rests with the people. That the authority of our government rests in the Constitution. And that in the words of Benjamin Franklin, when they were in the midst of the Constitutional Convention, he said this. He said, sirs, I have lived a long time. And the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this fact that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We're at a point in America and in Pennsylvania and here in Berks County where we need to call on the grace and mercy of God to help us bring back our country, not for our sake, but for our children and our grandchildren. God bless you and God bless America.